Welcome to the Blissful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host again, Michelle Abraham. Nice to see you all here today. I'm here with our founder and faculty member, Chuck Anderson. So welcome, Chuck. I'm so happy to have you here with us again today.
Michelle, it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm really thrilled about how the podcast is going so far. So awesome.
That's great. So we've been hearing from all sorts of amazing experts over the last few episodes, and it's so great to, hear everyone's different take and their different specialties, whether it's anxiety or back to school stuff or, any more medical kind of issues or, food issues. Whatever our experts have been talking about over the last few episodes has been really fantastic, and it's really great to kind of then come back together with you, our founder and faculty member. And what we're going to do today is check in and have some expert questions. So you're going to answer some questions. We might do this from time to time now. We're getting lots of questions in to Blissful Parenting. And so this is a new format we're going to check out today. And if you guys have questions, feel free to head over to theblissfulparent.com/ask. And you too can submit your question, and maybe we'll answer it live on our show.
That's awesome. And we really encourage you to send your questions in. Because this is your chance to program the show. What is it that you want to know? What is it that you want to hear from us? I mean, as faculty members, we have so much information to share, and it usually comes from our own brainstorming or inspiration or whatever. But I always find that the best sessions, and when I've discovered this a lot in my live workshops, is that when we do this sort of live Q&A, people are asking what they want to ask, then that's content that I think you're going to be a lot more interested in as well. So we are really counting on getting your feedback, getting your questions, and we are happy to answer anything that comes in.
Yeah, and sometimes people might be a little shy to ask a specific question. They don't want to be judged, or they don't. It's a little bit embarrassing to ask this question or that question. So this is a perfect platform to be able to do this, because it is anonymous, and we are just going to read your question out as if it was just someone who sent it in, and it's a great way to get that answered. And why not use the expertise that we have here? It's great to get their expert advice on all these questions. So Chuck, why don't we kick it off with our first question here?
Let's go for it.
Okay, so the first question, why do some people get so defensive when you try to give them helpful parenting advice? Is it maybe because they are actually a little bit insecure about their parenting style? What do you think?
Oh boy, yeah, this is a question, and we've actually had this discussion in some of our live workshops, and I think everyone can relate to that time where somebody gives you advice and it's unsolicited advice, meaning you didn't ask for it. And, some well-meaning individual or family member or friend felt compelled to share their wisdom with you, even though you didn't ask for it. And, I think whenever that happens and it wasn't asked for, I think that that's a time where it could be one of those automatic triggers where it's like, wait a minute, I didn't really ask you for that advice. I'm doing the best I can. And therefore, I might, have this reaction like, who are you to be giving me this advice? And so I think that's one reason that it happens, is that we're unprepared to get advice and we didn't ask for it. And I think that most people don't want to hear it unless they ask for it. In the coaching world, and when we went through our coach certification and our coaching certification program where we teach new coaches, we teach people, like, don't give people advice they didn't ask for. Ask permission. If you're going to give feedback, ask permission. It's a much nicer way to do it, and you're not going to kind of get that resistance or that defensiveness. So I think that's the first reason that it happens, is that we're maybe caught unprepared for it. The second reason that it happens is that maybe there is a little truth to, hey, we're not really feeling good about how things are going. I know I've certainly had moments where, I just didn't really feel confident in my parenting, or maybe I had a bad moment, my default definitely being control freak when I'm not rested, and when I'm not journaling regularly, and I'm not doing all of the things that help me to stay blissful and happy and not angry dad. when I'm not doing those things, it's very, very easy for me to have those reactions. And like I said, everyone, I think, is doing their absolute best. That being said, though, I don't think that when people are being defensive, they necessarily know that they're being defensive. I think it's just an automatic autopilot sort of reaction. I know anytime that I've done it, it certainly has been. And one of the things that, I've learned over the last decade of doing this is, to recognize when it's happening, and then to ask myself, what's really going on? Like, why am I defensive about that? And my journal is my best friend. So it's my therapist. It's where I write everything down. And when I have an issue, when maybe I didn't behave in the most appropriate way or whatever, I'm writing it down and resolving that. And I find that when I do that, I'm a lot less likely to be defensive or even to be doing anything that I need to be defensive about. So I do think that perhaps is a parent who maybe isn't feeling good about something that's happened recently, but also may have been receiving some advice, well-meaning or not, that they didn't ask for.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing worse than, somebody telling you you're maybe giving you some advice that you don't want when you're like not rested, not well nourished, haven't exercised, not feeling great about yourself. And then it's like someone's dumping on you. I think our automatic response, like you said, is going into defense mode. And I know I've done that before. It's not a good feeling, right? And oh gosh, that's crazy. And one of the things that while we're talking about unsolicited advice, one of the things that I find that the way I get defensive is when people who don't have children are giving me parenting advice or trying to parent my children while I'm there. It's like, oh, wait a second. I'm like, you don't have kids. You don't possibly know what it's like. So that's my take on it anyways.
Yeah, it happens a lot. And, I love it when it's people who don't have kids, but they're dog owners and they think that having a dog is the same as having kids. I love that. Well, what I do with my dogs is this. And this is like, not
doesn't work the same way.
That's one of the reasons too, like even with, our philosophy with the podcast, and I know we've mentioned this before, Michelle, is that we only get guests on this show who are actually parents because we believe that only parents really know what it's like to be parents. And you have had to have been in the thick of it, to really understand. But even in our support groups and whatnot, I mean, to give someone advice that they didn't ask for, it's probably going to get rejected, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the best thing is, and like I said, with our coaching, we always ask permission. Would you like some feedback on this? Would you like some suggestions? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay. That's okay. If you're not open to feedback, if you're not open to advice, then don't take it, right? So, yeah.
It's a good point. You don't have to listen to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Although some of it may be very helpful. It's all right. You got to be in the right time, in the right place to be able to accept it and be open to it too, right? So I'm going to jump over to another topic that's kind of similar. And this is the question that we got. And it's, why do some people have a tendency to want to blame their parents? Are they unable to accept responsibility for their own lives? So I thought that was kind of a little bit along the same lines.
Yeah, and this is something that I've experienced two different ways. I've experienced parents who blame their parents or the child's grandparents. I've also seen children, especially teens, blame their parents for things. And, let's start with the first situation. So, if only my, parents would have taught me better to do this, or if only they were more nurturing, or if only this wouldn't have happened when I was 11 or whatever. And yes, I'm sure that there's these experiences that have happened. And at a certain point, especially if we're someone, and at Blissful Parenting, we kind of believe in, the sign of a great parent is one that, is conscious of their own behavior. And when we're conscious of our own behavior, then it doesn't matter where we got it from. It doesn't matter if we got it from our parents. I'm absolutely sure that my parents did the absolute best job they could under their circumstances, and just the way things were. I mean, in the 70s, things were done a lot differently than they are now. Consciousness was, I think, different. and the attitude towards nurturing a child and nurturing family was different. And, also I had parents who were very, very busy and were working 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day. And so for my own story, I believe that my parents did the absolute best they could, and I believe that's probably true of your parents as well. I think everyone's sort of well-meaning, even though they might not be perfect. But at a certain point, we have to sort of draw the line and say, okay, this is the way things are, this is what's happening. What can I do about it? And when we shift from a place of blame, which is, oh, this is happening because of this person, or it's happening because of this circumstance, or it's happening because the government or whatever, when we shift away from that and we go into, okay, what can I do about this? A different type of answer is going to come back to you. It's a different type of attitude completely, and it completely disregards any reason why it's happening. It doesn't matter why. What matters is, what can I do about this? And even adding some intention into this, how can I deal with this in such a way that I leave my child feeling good about themselves, and I can also feel good about myself in the way I handled it. How can I do this in the most positive way possible? And so when we ask ourselves better questions, we don't have to blame. And then when we ask even higher quality questions where we set some intention in it, the kind of answer and support that we're going to get back is even that much better. And, give this a try and just notice the types of thoughts and ideas that you have when you start to ask yourself those kinds of questions. And so that's the first part. That's the parent who maybe is blaming other things. But then I notice it a lot. I'm raising a teenager and a preteen, so almost two teenagers here. And they haven't quite grasped that concept yet, right? So it's like, well, Dad, that happened because you didn't tell me, or that happened because you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. And so that's something that with our own children we are dealing with from time to time, and I think it's natural for them to want to blame their parents. And really my approach to it, and I think there's no one size fits all answer here, but my approach to it is to be the best example I can be. So if I can demonstrate to my children how I assume responsibility for things, even though, that might suck, and maybe I'm justified in blaming, or feel justified in blaming, some other person or circumstance for what's going on, by demonstrating how I take responsibility for the results and for what's happening and for implementing a solution, I'm leading by example. And, I know with my own children, they learn more from watching what I do and how I handle things than anything I could tell them intellectually. They don't want to be lectured. They don't want to be told stuff. But they are modeling my behavior. The good and the bad and the ugly, all of it, right? And so, hopefully more good than bad, but hey, we all have those moments. We all have those human moments, and they definitely learn from how I handle things. And so I think that we get to model for them what it means to take responsibility, and what it means to not blame others and circumstances and whatever. And that's very empowering. Very empowering when you can always find a solution no matter what happens. I believe it's giving someone ultimate power over the destiny of their life.
Yeah, that's great. And for those of us haven't, got rid of the blame game, like to learn it ourselves, to stop blaming, and then to model that for our kids, that's very empowering, because then they're going to learn that as well. And they're not going to grow up blaming us for things that we did, right? And you're so right. So parenting has changed so much over the last few years. And this topic that we're going to jump to next is one of those topics that's changed in the way parents deal with it over the last few years, or a few decades, I should say. So this question is about, how do you deal with a teenage girl, 17, almost 18, who thinks she's entitled to whatever she wants, free money, a car insurance, and much more when money is tight and you're barely scraping by financially? I'm sure this is a very popular question.
I love this one because I deal with this from time to time as well in my family, and that is, look, kids want things, right? They want things. And a lot of behavior that we deal with on a day-to-day basis is because they want things that don't necessarily align with what we want them to do or our means to give it to them or whatever. So, I mean, great example, if it was okay for my boys to play video games for 12, 14 hours a day without any limitations, that's what they want. As a parent who believes that that's not a healthy thing, I have to set limits and boundaries. And sometimes when we set limits and boundaries, that might get a backlash, right? So in this case with money, right? So anything that costs money, I mean, we've gone through this where, they want to buy something or whatever. And I think that when that comes up, yes, that sense of entitlement, or if an apparent sense of an entitlement, if I'm reading this properly, if that's sort of what's happening, can be very frustrating. And I think as an automatic pilot reaction, it's very easy to fight against that. Well, what do you mean you want me to buy you a car and you want all these fancy clothes? Like, you're sounding so entitled there. Don't you know the value of money? Why don't you go get yourself a job and start making some money? And as soon as we do that, we've just created one of those moments where we're going to butt heads and we're going to fight. Instead of looking at it as the opportunity that it is, and that is to teach and guide, I think, first of all, the value of money, and also the means in which to obtain money and to acquire the things that they want. I mean, this is a person, 18 years old. They've got their whole life ahead of them of earning money and acquiring things. And, they're coming through this period of, mom and dad have given them everything. But one of the parts of being a teenager is gaining independence over their life. And so I think it's a huge opportunity here, even if it's a bit uncomfortable, even if there's a few tears or whatever, to say, look, I love you, I support you, you want a car? Great, let's sit down and talk about how you could earn the money to get that car. Or you want those brand name designer clothes that all your friends are wearing, that are 10 times the price of anything else. Great, let's sit down and figure out how you can get those things. And let's use this as an opportunity, because I love you and I want you to be successful in life. And being able to raise money and be able to make those financial decisions, I think it's an important life skill that we all need to have. And so I would look at that as an opportunity to sit down with them and say, okay, how can you do this? Whether it be, support them on getting a job, take them to some job interviews, help them get a resume going, and let them look at what a budget is. I guarantee if your child goes and works 20 hours and only makes like $200 or $300, and all of a sudden that's worth like 2 pieces of clothing, they might stop and think about, okay, wait a minute, I just worked all this time and all I got was this one designer piece of clothing. And that they might actually start to rethink some of their wants and their demands. So I just see it as a huge opportunity to teach that value of money. And especially, I would assume that the person answering this question didn't like this and probably wanted to push back a little bit. But I would look at it as an opportunity to teach about money.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I totally agree with that as well. seems to be a good thing to be able to teach kids. I think even starting even younger, if you're starting to feel it. I know my son's turning 7 this week, and he wants and wants and wants and wants, and you want to give your child what they want, but you also want to make sure that they're not becoming a spoiled brat, right? So I think this is a good opportunity to really teach them some value in money too. I think that's great. And my next question, the next question that we got in is around the same lines. Do you think that it is a parent's responsibility to teach their children practical financial advice before they move out on their own?
Absolutely. Right. And again, that's my own judgment. I mean, for me, absolutely feel that it's my responsibility to set them up to be successful, independent adults. That doesn't mean that they can't ever come to me and ask for help or assistance or even to borrow money or whatever. And, we're always going to have a reasonable discussion about, how we're going to approach that. But absolutely, because if I just provide everything, and now all of a sudden, let's say they're 18, 19, 20 years old, and they go out there and they have no skills, they have no budgeting skills, they have no earning capacity, they have no sense of, what's good value or bad value, what's inexpensive or expensive, and are even how to generate money. And, some of my earlier work with and speaking at financial seminars, we were very big on financial education. Some of us aren't even financially educated. So how do we pass that on to our children? Well, that's where the responsible piece comes in. And like we said, the sign of a great parent is one that, looks at their own behavior first. Well, and there's great books. I mean, Kiyosaki wrote a great book called Rich Kid, Smart Kid. I would say get a copy of that. There's great advice in that book, and get educated yourself on what's the best way to introduce financial literacy to your child or your teenager or even your young adult, and support them through that. And it might be through your own learning and discovery, and maybe you're going through it together, and whatever it is, that's cool. But I absolutely believe that it's my job to prepare my children for independent adulthood. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I agree with that. Like, if you're not modeling good financial behavior yourself, it's really hard to teach your kids that. And I know, one of the things that happened to me when I was around that age, going to college, all of a sudden you get to college and there's all these credit card companies there. Hey, sign up for this credit card, sign up for that credit card. Well, I was like, yes, sweet. I got 2 or 3 credit cards, racked them up. And I think that I'm probably still paying that off like 20 years late, 25 years later.
I think I did that very same thing.
That was not a good idea. That was not a good idea. Yeah. So if you can use, if they can be educated about that before they get faced with that decision or that choice or that opportunity, that would be really great. So goodness. Crazy. Yeah, that's a great, make sure that your kids are set up financially. A little bit of their responsibility when it comes to money is a good one. Okay, so I want to jump over to kind of on a different topic. This question says, should I let my child have a lock on their bedroom door?
Yeah, and I could see how that could be a trigger, right? It's like, Mom, Dad, I want to put a lock on my door, and I know if it was me, the very first question in my mind would be, why do you want to lock your door? Like, what's in there that you don't want me to see, right? And I think that with the conversations I've had with people as well would be, pretty typical of the initial reaction to that. And, one of the things that we've learned through this entire journey, and we've layered throughout all the programs that we have in the Blissful Parenting Library, is to seek understanding of a situation, really understand a situation before responding. And so it might be very easy to assume that, okay, teenager is looking to hide something. So they want to put a lock on their door. Okay, Perhaps. And through your own digging and your own investigation, I would say connected conversation with your child, you might aim to discover that. If you come at them with judgment or resistance, then they're going to come back to you with resistance as well, and you're never going to get the answer. So seek understanding from a place of compassion and, just really trying to get the idea. And now here's the thing. There's an underlying goal of all teenagers. And this is something that we all have to remember, because it's so easy to take their behavior at face value and say, how could you talk to me like that? How could you do this? Well, it's not necessarily that they are trying to be bad or disrespectful. Is that they're at a phase in their life right now where they are trying to gain independence, right? There's a couple of big transitions in the whole growing up, and you discover it at first when they're like 2 or 3 years old, and they want that, they don't want you to do things for them. It's like, no, I'll do it, right? Like, they want that independence, and then there's another big phase of that at the teenage stage where it's like they're preparing to be adults. And so there is independence. So this desire for independence, for control over their destiny, to have some say into what happens to their future and in their lives. And just to really feel like they're in control of who they are. And it may be just as simple as that. So, it could be happening for a reason you really don't want, or it could just be happening because of their desire to be an independent human being. And so I think that's where that connected conversation comes in, where we're just seeking to understand. There's not judgment or no way you're not doing that, and the fight, which will really just drive them away. But just really trying to ask them questions to understand, okay, well, what would it mean to you if you now have a lock on your door? What's the benefit to your life? And that might seem like a weird question, but I guarantee if you go at your teenager with questions like that, they're going to go, oh, you never really asked me a question like that before. And if you talk in questions, you will start to receive answers. If you talk in judgment or demands, you're going to get nothing back.
Right. And even probably more closed off conversations then too, if you continue down that path. Yeah, that's interesting. I think my parents did a really great job of that, is that I was always able to do whatever I asked to do, they would always say yes. And I got to my 20s and I finally asked them, like, why did you always let me, you always said yes. All my other friends' parents said no and everything. I was always allowed to do stuff. And they said, well, we had no reason to say no, because we trust you. You've demonstrated you're responsible, and you've demonstrated that you're capable, have a smart head on your shoulders, and capable of having that independence. So I really appreciated my parents doing that. So I've kind of kept that in my mind as I become a parent, because of course we want to say no right away to a lot of those things. And it's a bit scary when they get into those teenage years and they start asking for more independence, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the phase of life that they're in, and it's that desire for independence. But that's not to say that there can't be bad things happening as well. The takeaway and, our approach always when we're coaching people is seek to understand what's really happening, clarify, evaluate before responding, right? And if there is something more dangerous or detrimental to their mental or physical health that's going on, then address that, but get the facts first and don't assume the worst. Expect the best, but do clarify and then respond appropriately.
That's great advice. I love that one. And our next question, which is going to be our last question. If you guys really like this style, I really encourage you to go over to blissfulparent.com/ask and send us your questions. Please, this is how we get to answer them for you, is by you going over there and asking them. So we love these questions coming in. They're really good. And we've learned a lot today from Chuck. It's been great talking about, how we were raised as kids, parenting styles, financial literacy, so many great things, and asking those questions of those teenagers. There's so many great things that we've learned today. So I'm going to ask one more question that's kind of along the same, just talking about, and this it kind of makes me smile the way this question is worded. So it says, if your child accidentally stole items from a store, would you take them back and pay? So what's your answer to that one, Chuck?
Yeah, so, and this is something that we've definitely talked about in our workshops as well, and sadly it happens. And look, they're kids want things. And sometimes when they can't have them in the way that they should be maybe getting them, they go to other means to get them. And I think that this, again, just like the money thing, is a huge opportunity for learning and that context. So what I would not do is I would not go back to the store, pay for the item, and bail them out of this situation, right? What I would do is I would take my child back to the store, and as uncomfortable as it is for them, and I would say also for myself, because let's face it, that's a pretty scary thing, but then to walk in and to admit that to the store owner and say, look, I made a mistake, here's what's happened, and I'm very sorry, here's the thing back, and I would also like to pay for you, and how can I make this right with you, right? And I think that's a number one, a great way of handling the situation, where you're giving the store owner that opportunity to say, yes, that I'm satisfied with the way you've handled this. And I think what it also does is it teaches your child a couple of things. It teaches your child the life skill of owning up to their mistakes, and also that and through that very scary and maybe painful experience of going back and confessing to what they've done will help to prevent them from doing this again in the future. And I love what Jane Nelson says in her book Positive Discipline, and that is that children learn best when they learn from natural consequences. Well, what's more natural than going back and admitting to a store owner that you made a mistake and you stole something? And it's not that I need to get mad at them or punish them or yell at them or whatever, but it's like, let's go back, admit what you've done. Just the discomfort of admitting that, I think, is natural consequences enough to perhaps get them to choose a different way of acquiring things the next time they want something.
Absolutely. That sounds like that would be a great thing to do. And I think that is a phase a lot of teenagers go through with that. Acquiring things from the drugstore without money is, I remember a bunch of friends doing that in high school. And I think that's a great way of doing it. Going back to the store and apologizing. Well, thank you, Chuck. There's been so many great nuggets here today. Audience, I hope you were listening in. So much great advice on how to deal with these tricky situations that we get into as parents. So thank you, Chuck, our founder and one of our faculty members. Thank you for being with us today. Can't wait to have you back here again soon. And you guys, this is a great format. I liked it. I hope you liked it. Chuck, I know you liked it.
It was a lot of fun, and I just want to, again, if you have questions, that's cool. You can go to the blissfulparent.com/ask and submit your questions. And look, sometimes there's no easy answer. Maybe you'd like a little bit of help with that. Go to blissfulparenting.com/coaching and get yourself a free coaching session, and we'll talk to you one-on-one about whatever's going on in your life, and hope we can help.
Great. So we're going to do this again down the road in a few episodes from now. We've got lots of questions coming in, and can't wait to do it again. So thank you, Chuck, for being with us. I hope to see you guys on our next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Blissful Parent Podcast. For complete transcriptions of this show, as well as helpful links to resources mentioned in this episode, please visit our website at theblissfulparent.com.